the scattered suns. The first thing Captain Elena Vasquez smelled when she stepped onto the bridge of her cargo hauler was smoke. Not the clean burn of engine exhaust or the metallic tang of recycled air. This was organic smoke, the kind that meant people were dying. "Status report," she barked, sliding into her command chair as the bridge crew scrambled around her. The wandering star had been pulled out of hyperspace by an emergency beacon, and Elena's gut told her she wasn't going to like what they'd find. "It's New Sydney Colony, Captain," reported her navigation officer, Tommy Liu. His young face was pale as starlight. "The whole settlement is burning." Elena's blood went cold. New Sydney was home to 40,000 humans, one of the largest colonies in the Outer Rim. Through the viewport, she could see the orange glow of fires spreading across the planet's surface like infected wounds. "Any survivors?" she asked, though she already feared the answer. "Picking up scattered life signs," Liu replied, his voice barely steady. "Maybe a few hundred. Captain, there are Nexari warships in orbit. 3 dreadnoughts." The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. Everyone knew what Nexari dreadnoughts meant. The insectoid empire didn't just conquer worlds, they sterilized them, leaving nothing but ash and memory. Elena stared at the burning world below and felt something ancient stir in her chest, something her grandmother had told her about in stories. Of old Earth, it was rage, pure and clean and absolutely deadly. "Get us out of here," she ordered quietly, "and send a message to every human ship in the sector. Tell them what we saw." 3 days later and 17 light-years away, Commander Jake Morrison was having the worst morning of his life, which was saying something for a man who'd spent the last 5 years running a mining operation in the ass end of nowhere. The Kepler-7 asteroid mining station wasn't much to look at, a collection of habitat modules and industrial equipment bolted to a spinning rock, but it was home to 3,000 people, and Jake had sworn to keep them safe. Now he was staring at a tactical display that showed him just how impossible that promise had become. 37 colonies hit in the last week, reported his intelligence officer, Maria Santos. Her dark eyes were haunted. "The Nexari aren't just raiding anymore, Jake. They're systematically hunting us." Jake ran a hand through his graying hair and tried to think like the soldier he'd once been, instead of the miner he'd become. The pattern was clear enough. The Nexari were targeting human settlements with military precision, hitting isolated colonies first and working their way toward the more established worlds. "What's the response from the Galactic Council?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Same as always. They're calling for diplomatic solutions and ceasefires that the Nexari ignore." Maria's voice was bitter. "The other species think this is just another territorial dispute. They don't understand that the Nexari see humans as vermin to be exterminated." Jake nodded grimly. That was the problem with being the new kids in the galaxy. Humanity had only been a spacefaring species for 3 centuries, and they'd spent most of that time running from the ruins of Earth. The older species saw them as clever scavengers, useful for dangerous jobs but not worth protecting when things got ugly. "Sir," called out his communications officer, "we're receiving a coded transmission. Human encryption, but the source is masked. Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was calm, authoritative, and absolutely certain. "This is a message for all children of Earth. The time for running is over. The time for hiding is over. Our people are dying, and the galaxy watches in silence. But we are not silent. We are not defenseless. And we will not be forgotten. Rendezvous. Coordinates are attached. Come home, brothers and sisters, come home to the fight." Jake stared at the empty screen long after the message ended. Around him, his bridge crew waited in tense silence. "Maria," he said finally, "start pulling up personnel files. I want to know how many of our people have military experience." "Jake, you can't be serious. We're miners, not soldiers." "No," Jake replied, his voice hard as asteroid iron. "We're humans, and it's time the galaxy remembered what that means." Dr. Sarah Chen was 3 levels deep in the research ship Darwin's Dream when the universe changed. She'd been studying tissue samples from a newly discovered species of spaceborne organisms when her laboratory's communication system chimed with an urgent message. Sarah pushed her glasses up her nose and activated the display, expecting another routine update from the ship's captain. Instead, she found herself looking at grainy footage of burning cities and fleeing civilians. "This is Captain Rodriguez," came the voiceover. "All senior staff to the bridge immediately. We've received priority communications from the outer rim." Sarah made her way through the ship's corridors, her mind racing. The Darwin's Dream was a pure research vessel, staffed mostly by scientists and explorers. They stayed away from politics and conflict, focusing on the endless mysteries of the galaxy's biological diversity. The bridge was crowded when she arrived, filled with her fellow researchers and the ship's small crew. Captain Rodriguez, a weathered man who'd spent 30 years exploring the galactic frontier, stood before the main display with the bearing of someone who'd seen too much. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I've just received confirmation of what we feared. The Nixari Empire has declared what amounts to a war of extermination against humanity. 37 colonies have been destroyed in the past week." The room erupted in shocked voices and fearful questions. Sarah felt her knees go weak. She had family scattered across a dozen worlds, friends and colleagues who'd chosen different paths through the stars. "Sir," called out Dr. Martinez from the Xenobiology Department. "What's the response from Earth Command?" Rodriguez's expression darkened. "There is no Earth Command anymore, Doctor. Earth has been uninhabitable for 3 centuries. We have no central government, no unified military. We're scattered across the galaxy like seeds on the wind." "Then what do we do?" someone called out. Before Rodriguez could answer, the ship's communications officer spoke up. "Captain, we're receiving a coded transmission. The encryption is old, but it's definitely human." "Play it." The voice that filled the bridge was different from any Sarah had heard before. It carried the weight of authority earned through decades of command, but there was something else, a pain that ran deeper than any physical wound. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane to all human vessels and settlements. Yes, I know you thought I was dead. The rumors of my demise were deliberately cultivated and entirely necessary. For 20 years, I have been building something in the dark spaces, between the stars, a response to the day we all knew would come." Sarah felt her breath catch. Admiral Kane was a legend, one of the heroes of humanity's early expansion into space. His flagship had vanished during a deep space exploration mission decades ago, and he'd been presumed lost. The Nixari believe they can eliminate us through superior firepower and numbers. They understand logistics and strategy, but they do not understand the human heart. They see our scattered nature as weakness, but it is our greatest strength. We are everywhere, and we remember everything. The Admiral's voice grew harder, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. "I am transmitting coordinates for a gathering point. Bring every ship, every weapon, every person willing to fight. We will show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity's children. We will show them that Earth's sons and daughters do not go gentle into that dark night." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah found herself thinking of her parents, lost in the evacuation of Earth 3 centuries ago, and of the stories they'd told her about the blue world humanity had been forced to abandon. "Captain," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice, "I volunteer for whatever Admiral Kane is planning." Rodriguez looked at her with something that might have been pride. "Dr. Chen, this is a research vessel. We don't have weapons or soldiers." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "We have knowledge, Captain. We know more about alien biology and psychology than any military force in the galaxy. If Admiral Kane wants to fight smart instead of just fighting hard, he's going to need people like us." Around the bridge, other voices began speaking up in agreement. The research staff of the Darwin's Dream might not be soldiers, but they were human, and they remembered where they came from. Captain Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Set course for the Admiral's coordinates, and send a message to every human ship we can reach. Tell them the children of Earth are finally coming home. In the depths of space, scattered across 100 worlds and 1,000 ships, humanity began to move. They came from mining stations and research outposts, from merchant vessels and exploration ships. They came carrying whatever weapons they could find and whatever knowledge they'd gathered in their long exile from home. The Nexari Empire had made a fatal error. They had threatened not just individual humans, but the memory of humanity's lost homeworld. And that memory, carried in the hearts of Earth's scattered children, was about to become their greatest weapon. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just remember where they came from, they remembered how to fight for it. The Reckoning Protocol. The rendezvous point was nothing more than empty space between stars, a coordinate in the void that had no name and no history. But when Elena Vasquez brought the wandering star out of hyperspace, she found herself staring at the largest gathering of human ships she'd ever seen. There were hundreds of them, cargo haulers like her own, mining vessels bristling with industrial equipment, research ships with their elegant sensor arrays, and even a few military escorts that had somehow survived the centuries since Earth's evacuation. They hung in space like a constellation of defiance, united by something stronger than government or law. "My God," whispered Tommy Lou from the navigation station. "How many people do you think are out there?" Elena studied the tactical display, trying to count the ships. Maybe 50,000, maybe more. She paused, feeling the weight of the moment. It might be the largest gathering of humans since the evacuation of Earth. Before anyone could respond, the communications array came, alive with an incoming transmission. The face that appeared on the screen was older than Elena remembered from the history books, marked with lines that spoke of decades in the dark spaces between stars. But the eyes were unmistakable. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane to all assembled vessels. Welcome home, children of Earth." Kane's image was being broadcast to every ship in the fleet, but somehow it felt like he was speaking directly to Elena. Behind him, she could see the bridge of a warship she didn't recognize, sleek, dangerous, and definitely not built by any of the galaxy's known shipyards. "You're all wondering how I survived, where I've been, what I've been doing for the past 20 years. The answers are simple. I've been planning, building, and preparing for this day. The day when humanity would need to stand together or face extinction." The Admiral's voice carried the authority of absolute command. But there was something else there. A pain that Elena recognized from her own mirror. It was the look of someone who'd lost everything and decided to make that loss mean something. For 3 centuries, we've been refugees in our own galaxy. We've built new homes, new lives, new communities, but we've never forgotten where we came from. The other species see this as sentimentality, as weakness. They don't understand that memory is power, and our memory runs deeper than they can imagine. Elena found herself leaning forward, caught up in Kane's words despite herself. Around her, the bridge crew listened in absolute silence. "The Nexari Empire believes they can eliminate us through superior numbers and firepower. They're wrong. They understand war as a matter of logistics and strategy, but they don't understand the human heart. They don't understand that we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone we've ever lost, everyone we've ever loved, and everyone we hope to become." Kane's expression hardened, and Elena saw something in his eyes that made her blood run cold. It was the look of a man who'd stared into the abyss and decided to stare back. "I give you Operation Homecoming. Not a battle, not a campaign, but a reckoning. We're going to hit the Nexari where they don't expect it, how they don't expect it, with weapons they've never encountered. We're going to fight like humans." The transmission ended, replaced by detailed tactical data flowing to every ship in the fleet. Elena stared at the plans in amazement. Kane wasn't just proposing to fight the Nexari. He was proposing to outthink them, outmaneuver them, and turn their own strengths against them. Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. On the mining station-turned-battleship that Jake Morrison had christened the Iron Wolf, his crew gathered around the tactical displays with the intensity of prospectors who'd just struck the mother lode. "It's brilliant," breathed Maria Santos, studying the operational parameters. "He's not trying to match their firepower. He's using our adaptability against their rigid command structure." Jake nodded, seeing the beauty of Kane's strategy. The Nexari fought like insects, disciplined, coordinated, but utterly dependent on their command hierarchy. If you could disrupt their communications, confuse their leadership, or simply present them with scenarios they hadn't anticipated, Their entire tactical doctrine would collapse. "Look at this," Jake said, pointing to a section of the battle plan. "He wants us to hit 17 different targets simultaneously. Not their main battle fleets, but their supply lines, their communication hubs, their administrative centers. Death by 1,000 cuts," Maria observed. "Make them chase us across the galaxy while their empire crumbles from within." Jake grinned, feeling more alive than he had in years. "Get me a channel to all our mining ships. If Kane wants unconventional tactics, we're going to show him what 3,000 miners can do with industrial equipment and bad attitudes." Meanwhile, aboard the Darwin's Dream, Dr. Sarah Chen was discovering that scientific knowledge could be the deadliest weapon of all. Kane's tactical data included detailed psychological profiles of Nexari command structures, their cultural blind spots, and their species-specific phobias. "They're terrified of biological contamination," she told Captain Rodriguez, scrolling through the intelligence reports. "Their entire civilization is built around genetic purity and sterile environments." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking, Doctor?" Sarah's smile was sharp as a surgical scalpel. "I'm thinking we load our cargo holds with every diseased, mutated, and generally unpleasant organism we've collected in 5 years of deep space research. Then we introduce the Nexari to some of the galaxy's more interesting biological diversity." Across the fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Merchants were converting cargo haulers into missile platforms. Engineers were turning maintenance drones into swarm weapons. Scientists were weaponizing everything from stellar cartography to xenolinguistics. But the real transformation was happening in the hearts of the humans themselves. For 3 centuries, they'd been survivors, refugees, wanderers in a galaxy that barely tolerated their presence. Now, for the first time since leaving Earth, they were becoming something else entirely. They were becoming a people at war. The first phase of Operation Homecoming began 72 hours later, with a coordinated strike across 17 star systems. The Nexari, accustomed to facing conventional military forces, found themselves dealing with threats they'd never imagined. Mining ships appeared in their industrial systems, using asteroid-moving equipment to hurl rocks at orbital installations, with devastating effect. Research vessels infiltrated their biological research stations, releasing carefully selected organisms that sent entire Nexari populations into quarantine panic. Merchant ships loaded with improvised weapons struck at supply convoys, then vanished into hyperspace before military reinforcements could arrive. And everywhere they went, they left behind messages in perfect Nexari script. "The children of Earth remember." Elena Vasquez found herself leading a squadron of converted cargo haulers against a Nexari logistics hub in the Kepler sector. Her ships weren't warships. They were improvised nightmares bristling with mining lasers, industrial welders, and cargo manipulators converted into weapons. "Remember," she told her squadron over the communication link, "we're not trying to destroy everything. We're trying to make them scared, confused, and angry. Hit the communication arrays first, then the supply depots." The attack was pure chaos. From the Nexari perspective, Elena's ships came in from unexpected vectors, used maneuvers no military vessel would attempt, and employed weapons that didn't exist in any tactical database. By the time Nexari military forces arrived, the humans were gone, leaving behind crippled infrastructure and a very clear message. Jake Morrison's mining fleet struck even deeper, hitting a Nexari administrative world with weapons that turned industrial equipment into instruments of psychological warfare. His ships used mining charges to trigger carefully calculated seismic events, turning the planet's own geology into a weapon. "The beautiful thing about miners," Jake told his crew as they watched Nexari cities shake themselves apart, "is that we know how to make the ground itself fight for us." But it was Dr. Sarah Chen who delivered perhaps the most devastating blow. Her team had identified a critical weakness in Nexari psychology, their absolute terror of genetic contamination. Using the Darwin's Dream's sophisticated biological laboratories, they created a series of harmless but highly visible organisms that mimicked the appearance of deadly diseases. When these organisms began appearing in Nexari water supplies across multiple worlds, the reaction was immediate and catastrophic. Entire populations went into quarantine, shutting down transportation, communication, and military logistics. "It's working," Chen reported to Admiral Kane during one of their encrypted communication sessions. Their entire military doctrine is based on maintaining rigid control and sterile environments. By introducing chaos and contamination, we're forcing them to fight on our terms instead of theirs. Kane's weathered face showed something that might have been approval. Excellent work, Doctor. But remember, this is just the beginning. The real test comes when they stop reacting and start adapting. He was right. After 2 weeks of devastating human attacks, the Nexari High Command finally began to respond with something approaching coherent strategy. They pulled their scattered forces back into defensive formations, established secure communication protocols, and began hunting for the source of the human coordination, which was exactly what Kane had been waiting for. Phase 2 begins now, he announced to the assembled human fleet. Around him, the bridge of his mystery warship hummed with activity. They think they've figured us out. They think they know how we fight. Time to show them they're wrong. Second phase of Operation Homecoming was different from the first. Instead of scattered raids and hit-and-run attacks, Kane coordinated a direct assault on the heart of the Nexari Empire itself, their capital world of Nexus Prime. But this wasn't a conventional assault. As the Nexari fleet moved to defend their homeworld, they found themselves facing an enemy that fought like no military force they'd ever encountered. Elena's merchant ships didn't engage in ship-to-ship combat. They used their cargo capacity to deploy thousands of improvised drones, turning space around Nexus Prime into a chaotic storm of small, unpredictable targets. Jake's mining vessels didn't fight like warships. They fought like engineers, using their industrial equipment to reshape the battlefield itself, turning asteroids into weapons and manipulating gravitational fields to disrupt Nexari formations. Sarah's research ships didn't carry conventional weapons. They carried information, broadcasting psychological warfare messages that exploited every weakness in Nexari culture and psychology. And through it all, Admiral Kane's mysterious warship moved like a ghost, striking at precisely the right moment to maximize confusion and terror. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Nexari High Command was dead, their fleet was scattered, and their empire was in chaos. But more importantly, the galaxy had seen something it had never seen before. Humanity fighting not as refugees or survivors, but as a unified people with a common purpose. In the aftermath of the battle, as human ships gathered in the space around the defeated Nexari homeworld, Elena Vasquez found herself thinking about her grandmother's stories of old Earth. The blue world was still gone, still lost to ecological collapse and human folly, but its children had finally come home to themselves. "Admiral Kane," she said over the fleet communication channel, "what happens now?" Kane's voice, when it came, carried the weight of 3 centuries of exile and the promise of something better. "Now, Captain Vasquez, we build something new. Not just scattered colonies and isolated settlements, but a true human civilization, one that remembers where it came from and knows where it's going." Around Nexus Prime, the largest gathering of human ships in 3 centuries hung in space like a constellation of possibility. They were no longer refugees, no longer wanderers, no longer forgotten children of a dead world. They were humanity, united at last, and the galaxy would never be the same.